Hi there, Infernal here. We tend to play video games to escape, to explore speculative places beyond our own. Moreover, the appeal tends to be in the power fantasy, the larger-than-life scenarios that are encountered by player characters that are walking death machines. However, I find that I'm drawn to games that essentially do the opposite, those which make the player feel small, both literally and figuratively. I don't necessarily mean that the games make me feel lesser, but rather that they fill me with a sense of awe and spectacle. They're the games that really evoke a sense of wonder in me. Perhaps the premier power fantasy game is Doom, especially the very early Doom games. They place the player in a position to be a walking agent of death as they rip and tear through every level. It's cathartic and, well, it works. Halo is another example that built on the trope and introduced more nuance. In Halo Combat Evolved, the Master Chief is already a living legend prior to the events of the game, a super soldier with a standing reputation.
I appreciate your concern, Cortana, but it's not up to me.
Though it has a bit more story and subtlety, Halo still largely remains a power fantasy. That's where my tastes begin to diverge, though. I'm drawn to games that dwarf the player, games that remind you that you're only a tiny presence in an enormous world. Perhaps the game that captures this best for me will be Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus achieves this feeling in several ways, some obvious, others much more subtle. The most evident way is clearly the size of the colossi, but in fact this size discrepancy is actually built into almost every aspect of the game. From the onset, the player character Wander carries the unconscious Princess Mono and lays her down in a massive fortress while he tries to discover how to bring her back to life. As I mentioned in my video featuring Eco, the player is once again struck by the contrast of massive structures next to the relatively tiny character. As Wander sets out in the world itself feels huge, even though the total size is much smaller than current open world games. And why? Again, scale and contrast. It takes time to go from one Colossus to another, and every Colossus is given its own crafted space that feels like an organic part of the holistic environment, and not a clear boss arena that might be used in other games of the time. But Shadow of the Colossus also achieves smallness in many of the ways that games like Eco and the Souls games do. It gives the player a sense of transcendence. Given barely any guidance aside from small tutorial text, it encourages the player to explore on their own merits. So when I say games like Shadow of the Colossus make us feel small, I don't mean this as a negative. In fact, I mean that it inspires an almost childlike wonder in the player to keep exploring every inch of the environment. The game Journey is a unique and special experience that hits on this feeling of smallness quite effectively. It's a game that accentuates loneliness, but it actually creates a feeling of solace and reverence instead of crushing isolation. Even the minimal UI of the game reinforces the idea that you're a traveler in this world, not a hero. Even playing with a co-op partner, there's never really a feeling of conquest, but rather of grandiose exploration. It invites quiet contemplation and stillness. The sheer scale of the journey itself and the space between landmarks is awe-inspiring, much in the way we feel humbled when we view natural landscapes on Earth, or when we stargaze on clear nights. Journey makes you feel small through space, through distance, silence, and scale. But smallness doesn't always come from size. Sometimes it comes from powerlessness, from being reminded that no matter what you've accomplished, you're never fully in control. That's where Metroid Prime comes in. Samus begins the game at full power, and early on, is stripped of everything but her basic suit and blaster. The game gives you a taste of what she's capable of, but then takes it away and forces the player to adapt and improvise. Creatures that barely registered become legitimate threats. Talon's surface isn't just a place to explore, it's somewhere you're trying to survive. It's primarily through vulnerability that Metroid Prime makes the player feel small. When every room has the potential to be dangerous, you stop rushing forward. You begin paying attention to the world around you. As such, the world of Talon 4 gives the player a sense of humility, a place of ancient lore that existed long before Samus arrived. Metroid is in general excellent at developing this feeling of smallness, actually. Super Metroid takes Samus through the planet Zebes, which becomes increasingly hostile as the player progresses. The game matches your achievements by increasing the stakes and difficulty to match Samus, so she never feels overpowered. Even after becoming incredibly powerful, Zebes never really feels conquered. Walking to a new area still carries uncertainty. The silence, the music, and the sheer emptiness of the planet make you feel like an explorer rather than a conqueror. It shows us what Journey does, if in a slightly different key. It also imbues a sense of vulnerability, but more so in how the game scales with the player, rather than how it takes it away. So, what is it about this smallness that sticks with us? I think it's because wonder begins the moment we stop feeling like the center of the world. This is also what From Software excels at. Nearly every environment is designed to feel massive, isolating, and humbling to the player. The world of those games exists in spite of the player. They're ancient spaces that were there long before the player arrived. You're not the center of history, you're simply the next person to stumble into it. You're next in line on a quest many have already attempted before you. I've mentioned Ash Lake as a space that evokes powerful feelings of stillness before, but an environment that even more recently gave me this feeling is the Siofra River area in Elden Ring. The massive, impossible skybox with endless stars that somehow exists underground still fills me with a quiet reverence, even after the initial sheen of Elden Ring wore off. There's a reason I mentioned it as one of my 10 favorite areas in any Souls game. Mysteries abound in the area, from how the structures were formed to how they even exist. It rekindles that same sense of curiosity that keeps me coming back, and that forever keeps me invested. Maybe that's why these moments stay with us long after we've finished the games themselves. What's interesting is that none of these moments in these games ask anything of the player. There's no particular boss to defeat, no reward waiting at the end. The game simply gives you permission to exist in its world for the moment. They're the games that remind me that wonder isn't found in feeling larger than life. Sometimes it's found in realizing just how small we actually are. Alright, so if you enjoyed this video and would like to support the channel, there are a few ways you can help. If you're picking up a new game, importing a physical release, or adding something to your collection, using my PlayAsia affiliate link is a great way to support the channel at no additional cost to you. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can also find my Patreon and other social links in the description below, where I share updates, behind-the-scenes content, and ways to help support future videos. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.